Hello, hello. It is Celeste on the Sales Edge. I am joined by Maggie Maloney, and we are going to talk about stopping the over engineering of discovery with your team. So, Maggie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Maggie Maloney. I am the Global Head of Strategic Account Development over at Televerde. So I lead a sales development team that helps support our internal sales team. The majority of our strategy, coaching up our team, account targeting, and generating new business through outbound prospecting.
Yes. So, I had met Maggie through gap selling, some training, and have glommed onto her on LinkedIn because the information she's pumping out as a frontline manager, like in the trenches, doing the do, is very inspiring for other sales leaders who maybe have taken their foot off the gas and are not as connected with what their team is doing day to day. So, Maggie, what recently struck me is you made a post about how we are over engineering the sales process, especially with discovery, on forcing our teams to ask specific questions. And tell us about how you've stripped that away from what your team and what you're doing.
Yeah, so it's been a wild ride, right? Because the first thing I did is I took away all of the questions that my team typically had for qualification, which is how they were running discovery. What was really missing from that was understanding current state, future state, all of the great things that I've learned from reading gap selling and participating in the trainings. And also it was breaking the conversational flow, right? And I think when we think about like how do we earn trust, how do we get people to open up, it's through that active listening, maintaining conversational flow, that we're really able to get deep within the business conversation, understand what people are struggling with, what they need to address their challenges. And so yeah, I took away their questions.
And if you need to take your dog out, more than welcome to be on camera. Sounds like your dog is chiming in. Like, yes, this is the way. Strip the teams of the checklist and the questions. And I'm sure that was a very jarring to your team to not have this safety net of go-to questions to ask. So instead, how do you frame it up for them to have those guide rails for discovery?
So yeah, it was super jarring for them, right? A lot of my team, they've been doing this for some time, and it's a guardrail. It's a guide to how do we conduct this conversation. And so one of the things that we've been doing is we've been trying to role play through like what does it mean, because it really comes from the active listening and being super present in what's actually being shared for you and what's the next logical question, what's that thing that you're curious about and you want to know more about. And like I'm always sharing with them, I'm like, it's one thing to hear, but a lot of times I think we assume that we know what they are, that we understand everything, but prospects always know a lot more about their world than they're even sharing on the surface level. And so it's through this sort of exercise that we're doing. It's a popcorn session for role playing. What we are practicing is we're actually taking snippets of calls from Gong, and then we're role playing that out as a team, right? Because I think what happens a lot of times is we try and foresee like how is this conversation going to go, and you have to kind of let go of those expectations. And so what we're doing is it's starting as it popcorns around in terms of one person asks a question, a person answers, but we're starting with a clip through Gong. So what they're able to do then is they're able to listen to that, and then that one person will answer like a question that they might want to know something more about, and then they choose someone to answer that, because then there's no expectation. I think even when I role play with the team, I'm guiding the conversation through what I say because I know where I want them to go. But if we do it as a group in this way, it's like nobody knows what anyone's going to say or ask. And it gives that a little bit more of a realistic scenario of what does it look like when you're on the call with the prospect, because you never know. You can ask a question and think you're going to get what kind of answer you're going to get, and you could get something completely different.
Yes. Stop with the scripted role play. Start with the real play. I love that because it's very similar to what we do in role play, which freaks people out, where we just start. Okay, ask me a question. And then the next person has to pick up from that. And we're looking to see, are they actively listening? Are they using responsive questions? Are they diving deeper? But you can't script it.
You can't. Like it's conversation. Conversation is not scripted. And that's the one thing I always tell my team, because I listen, this idea came from listening to a massive amount of calls towards the end of last month. And one of the things that I noticed is like those little cues. It's like, wait, like they said this, like, and it's surprising. Like I've had some reps where I'm like listening to calls and like they'll ask a question and the prospect is like, did I say that? And it's like, you want, and they're like, yeah, like you, and they're like, oh, yeah. And it's like those moments like that, like that is how we build trust, is through that listening and really like listening and asking intelligent questions and like building that curiosity. It's like, to the Keenan's point, right? Like you don't have to be liked, but it's through that active listening that you build that trust. And if you're going through and it's like, oh yeah, like I heard this, but like I know the next question that I need to ask is whatever's on this call guide, you're breaking that flow and you're breaking that trust without even realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But you can kind of hear it. Like if you go back and listen to those calls, you hear the dynamic change. You hear the pitch change, and you can just feel like the demeanor change. And it's like, I don't know, it's like the most important thing to me. And so that's like our number one focus, is more than anything is maintaining that conversational flow and active listening by asking those questions and getting really, really curious without the script.
So many team members don't want to change how they're doing things. It's our blankie, it's our binky, it's what we know. How are you working with your team to adopt a new way of approaching discovery?
Oh, it's really through the practice, right? Even as like one of the things I've seen over time is, so it's been about 2 weeks, well, mid July, that we started like this really heavy, like, what could you have asked to progress a conversation, even with just like general objection handling, things like that, to really get their mind listening. So they have an exercise that they're doing where it's self-evaluation, listening to gong calls. We have the role plays that we're doing to practice some of that. And where I say like it's really the practice piece of it is I have ladies and agents on my team that they can self-coach themselves to the same capacity that I self-coach them, or that I coach them. Like they will go in and they are leaving the same feedback that I would leave, so it's not an understanding. It's a practice. It's so ingrained in us that it's hard live with a person, with a prospect on the phone, to actually implement the things that you should be implementing, because it's been so ingrained. So that's the only thing that I've found that is working, like through that self-coaching and then the practical application as a team and working through that we've started to see those shifts in the calls that we're having.
And I know you shared with me prior about your team's successes and the wins that they've had. For other sales leaders, as we kind of wrap up this mini session, what would you say to them if they're not taking the time to listen to calls, to actively coach on behaviors and changing behaviors, and to take the time to pour into their team? What would you say to them to like spark that for them to turn around? Yeah, that was yeah, awesome. Well, I've appreciated you sharing what you're working on with your team. I think it's genius, and the others can learn from it. Hit up Maggie, follow her content on LinkedIn. She will continue to share her journey as a leader. And thank you so much for being with us.